Football has faced many challenges over the past couple of years. Clubs have been pushed to the brink and beyond following financial difficulties.
Bury Football Club have been expelled from the EFL.
A global pandemic meant that football stadiums around the world fell silent.
Let's bring some breaking news now, and it is very significant breaking news in terms of the future of football.
And the threat of the European Super League almost changed football as we know it. But the response to the Super League demonstrated what can be achieved when the football community comes together. And now, football faces an even bigger threat on the horizon.
Climate change now is a time where we can have no division, where we have to be really united.
These are existential threats and they're very perilous to the future of football.
It's probably the World Cup final and it's the last minute of extra time. We got to act now.
The last summer has been swelteringly hot. The highest ever recorded temperature in the UK, 40.3 degrees Celsius, on the 19th of July 2022, when football clubs are bang in the middle of their pre-season preparations. And then, drought declared in England just 4 weeks later, after the driest July since 1935. But we've been here before, and with other climate extremes too. In 2007, Sheffield Wednesday's famous old ground Hillsborough was flooded after the River Don burst its banks, leaving the pitch submerged and the dressing rooms, the club shop and the offices badly damaged. In 2015, Carlisle United's Brunton Park suffered a similar fate because of Storm Desmond, with the repair bill running into the millions. The climate emergency will only make these events longer, more frequent and more extreme. Writer and academic David Goldblatt is the foremost expert in this area. David, good to see you. We're here at Tadcaster Albion today. Tell us why this club is relevant about what we're talking about.
It's a lovely summer's day today. Ground's a bit parched. You wouldn't think there would be a problem, but 3 times in the last 7 years, the river that runs on the back of this ground has flooded, and that's extreme weather leads to extreme flooding. This is the climate crisis, and I'm not talking a few puddles on the pitch. We're talking 1.5 metres of water. I mean, enough to cover us and this dugout, and that means no football.
So how serious is the climate crisis for football and flooding specifically for all of football?
In England, it's really serious. My calculations are around a quarter of professional stadiums in the top 4 leagues are under threat of annual flooding or actually being underwater by 2050.
Okay, let's take a little bit of a wander. Here at Tadcaster, we've got the river just behind us. Is it clubs like this, ones close to bodies of water, like say Southampton on the coast, that are affected? Which other clubs are at risk here?
Okay, so when we talk about coastal stadiums and clubs that are under threat, Southampton, St Mary's is really close to the water and really low. Grimsby, Scunthorpe are in quite a lot of trouble. And then inland, you know, that's the thing with the climate crisis. It's not just rising sea levels, it's more extreme rain, more extreme storms, systems that can't cope with the volume of water coming into them, like here, the river at Tadcaster that then flooded into the stadium. And that's going to affect some really big clubs. You know, West Ham, you know, at the Olympic Stadium, Chelsea Stamford Bridge, Fulham, Craven Cottage is really in trouble. I mean, they had their shop flooded actually earlier this year. There's more of that to come.
Flooding is a particular cause for concern further down the footballing pyramid, with smaller venues more exposed to the elements.
You know, one of the main challenges that we have on an annual basis is to protect from flooding, and since I've been at the football club in the last 4.5 years, you know, we've had quite significant flooding on 2 occasions. Directly, immediately, you know, you look at the revenue point of view and the cost of both mitigation, and then in course of, you know, putting things back together again once you cause floods. But I think equally football clubs are pillars of the community, and when you deem these facilities and you render them out of action for a period of time, you know, you're actually taking away a piece of the community. You know, what we have at Lincoln and other football clubs. You know, football clubs are far more than just a venue for Saturday at 3 p.m. They're a hotspot for lots of activity within the community, and of course, whenever flooding happens, we also lose those, you know, non-match day events and activities as well.
I think the lower down the pyramid of football you go, the more susceptible football clubs are to the impacts of climate change. You know, the pitches are less able to cope with periods of big rain or periods of no rain, for example. And, you know, they don't have the money either to make the changes that they need to make. And so the higher up the leagues you go, the more adaptable the clubs are because they've got the cash to do it.
It's no secret that we absolutely love playing at Boreham Wood. It's been our home ground for years, but it's definitely more susceptible to the variations in weather and flooding. The more that we travel across England and experience those different climate changes, it's obvious at the pitches we play at, which of course does make it more susceptible to games being cancelled or postponed, so the effect is definitely there.
And even further afield, how much is this an issue in other countries, internationally?
I mean, this is an issue everywhere on the planet, but just like looking over the last year, you know, you had incredible floods in autumn 2021 across Northern Europe through Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany and Austria. And we know, you know, the German Olympic Committee said that more than 100 million euros worth of damage had been done to grassroots sports infrastructure in Germany alone.
After the holidays, I went to Germany. Drove through some streets. We saw everything destroyed. You know, the water was very high, and then we heard about a lot of people near to my home, where a lot of people lost, like, really their whole life. They lost their houses, their clothes. They lost, for example, their pets. They lost memories, pictures in their houses. So they have nothing anymore.
It affected everybody, and I think. Nobody could imagine that this can happen so quickly. I mean, the intense of the rainfalls, I think we have never seen this before, and this was surprising for everybody. And it has to be because of the warming of the climate, because this is the only thing that really changed. I think, this was the reason why we had so big problems in Germany and in Austria this season.
Seeing those things happen, especially around here where it hasn't happened in such a long time, was a little bit worrying. And I think we are looking at those events and also the whole thing that's going on with the climate change. I think it's just always right in front of you.
What about recreational football? Non-league pitches, Sunday league pitches, school games, just kickabouts. Are they in any way more vulnerable?
They're already vulnerable right now. I mean, the research that has been done suggests that 1/3 of grassroots pitches in England are losing around 6 weeks every season, you know, to flooding and to inadequate drainage.
The peril around football is massive in terms of the climate crisis all over the world, but even in Europe we're seeing games being put off because of storms, because of damage, because of flooding, because of pitches being unusable. And we're not just talking about an elite level, we're talking about a grassroots level. So these are existential threats and they're very perilous to the future of football at an elite level, but at a grassroots level, how are we possibly going to have the talent coming through if people can't train in their local grassroots pitches because of the extreme weather events that we're facing?
If you look back at 2016, the storms then, the damage that was caused to football facilities cost clubs massively. Then suddenly you look at higher insurance premiums as well for clubs. So it's a real balancing act at the moment. And in this region, I think we probably lose or postpone roughly about 9,000 to 10,000 games per season on the whole.
And that's due to flooding in the main, but a day like today, with water shortages, the cost of water as well. So to keep the pitches at a decent level, it's going to impact as well.
Of course, climate change, as I mentioned, isn't just flooding. This pitch actually looks okay compared to some that I've seen this summer. But what are the other effects of the climate emergency on football?
Well, temperature is the big one, and we know from the heat waves this summer, this thing is real. You know, there are more heat waves, they're lasting longer, they'll be at more variable times of the year. And once you get over 35 degrees centigrade, you know, physical activity starts becoming problematic. And once you start hitting the high 30s and into the 40s, you're looking at heat exhaustion, you're looking at heat stroke at every different level of the game. And not just players, this is also going to affect officials. This is going to affect crowds. You know, particularly if you haven't got much shade, even if you have got shade, you know, you're going to start seeing heat stroke and heat exhaustion, you know, amongst the punters. So it's going to have a big effect on the way the game is played. I mean, right now, you know, in Italy, where you would do your pre-season training through August, you know, you start a little bit later than in England, and now teams are finding it's impossible to train outdoors in Italy for most of August because it's just too hot.
The last couple of years, you've seen extreme temperatures in the summer, in our pre-season camps, especially playing now in Southern Europe, where you see in the summer months it's really difficult to play in the daytime because of the temperatures, and that's something, you know, that will only increase and it will get worse. And I mean, this is a huge problem. Football is really difficult to play above 30 degrees, and I mean, last couple of summers we had temperatures up to 40 degrees. Even when I played in Holland, it was a couple of summers where it was really, really hot. And I mean, these are things that we're only seeing the beginning of, and that will get even worse.
I remember 3 years ago here in Italy, I was coming back from holiday from Denmark, and there was 36 degrees here, the first training session, and I couldn't play. I was like dizzy and saw like small black spots around me, so I had to stop because it was simply too warm.
So that's extreme heat. What about air pollution, David? So how does that have an effect? More than just, you know, the quality of the air you breathe, it's all sorts of things, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, air pollution when combined with heat is really bad news for athletes. You imagine the amount of air that they're breathing in compared to the rest of us. Research work that's been done on this suggests that, you know, even if you make it through the game, actually the quality of play, the quality of decision making by players is affected by pollution and by heat. So you're actually going to see a poorer quality game. Yeah, a lot of problems down the line, of which, you know, the climate crisis is at the top, but you add these other environmental problems onto it. We will be seeing these kinds of things in the next decade for sure.
In Italy, there are some areas that's struggling a lot with air pollution, especially the area around Milan, where it's one of the most polluted places in all of Europe because of its geographic exposure. But there I actually experienced some pretty bad. I have some pretty bad experiences around the games we played against Milan and Inter, where you actually, you have poor air quality, and you know, that's something, you know, most football teams are based in cities. And, you know, polluted places all over the world. I mean, playing football in polluted air is, you know, just in terms of health, a huge issue.
Australia with the fires, we played through, had a lot of actual games canceled because there was too much ash, too much, you know, air quality was too poor. And those temperatures were so hot that it was unplayable. Or we were playing games at like 9 p.m. at night to try and, like, you know, miss that heat wave.
We have 30 venues that have got air quality that's over World Health Organization safe guidelines. So as much as we're trying to grow the game and grow participation, we're kind of pushing people to areas where long-term lung and respiratory issues could happen the more they play in those areas.
Having clean air, clean water, you know, that's something we all can agree to. It's fundamental beliefs of, you know, human health. And we're seeing millions of people being affected by this now and will be in the future if we don't do something. And I mean, football doesn't work in a world like that.
Undoubtedly, the climate crisis is a huge threat to football. But how is football contributing to the problem, and what is being done to fight back?
It's about energy, transport and food. It's about how you power yourself, how you travel and what you eat.
I think FIFA and UEFA have this responsibility to say, we are just going to do it and everyone has to get in line.
The UEFA responsibility is clear. We feel that we need to act.
The climate emergency is already impacting football. But how does the game itself unwittingly help cause some of the consequences we've seen?
The carbon footprint of a football club is no different to the carbon footprint of a person or a business of any size. It's about energy, transport and food. It's about how you power yourself, how you travel and what you eat. You also have embedded carbon footprints, and this stadium is built out of concrete and steel. It's very conventional. It'll have a huge embedded carbon footprint for that reason.
So if the problem areas are easily identifiable, who should be responsible for tackling these issues? Well, there's plenty of debate here.
I think FIFA and UEFA have this responsibility to say, we are just going to do it
and everyone has to get in line.
The more the athletes push back, I think the organizations have to change.
Ultimately, it can only be the governing bodies, the people at the top of the tree who are making the decisions.
I think everyone does have the responsibility to try and make those things better.
I don't think it comes down to one person. I think it comes from the top to kind of create that change, create that message, and then it filters down.
Climate change is everybody's business. This has to be holistic, it has to be government-led, it has to be international.
I think government does need to show leadership, and I think government needs to support football to make some changes, but it is not entirely government's responsibility. So in football, it's really important that the sports governing bodies take the lead and make it easy for the clubs to do the right thing.
So clearly, the major football organisations have a part to play. But what plans do they have in motion to fight the climate emergency?
The UEFA responsibility is clear. We feel that we need to act. We feel that is responsibility. We need to use our power to create our match in this field and to win the match. We understand that the increasing number of the matches can have an impact, but we need to take in consideration not only this part, we need to take in consideration also the economic impact. The formats are changing because the fans are asking something different. The clubs are asking something different. We want to engage the National Association, we want to engage the clubs. We are in this process, like to have the sustainability manager mandatory, to have the strategy. But all DNAs, all the clubs will never will be alone. UEFA will support them with a structure, with the expertise to help them to start or to continue their journey in these topics.
The FA and Premier League have also upped their efforts to fight for a more sustainable game. In a statement, the FA described the climate crisis as one of the most pressing issues of our time, which, at its current rate, will have a wide-reaching impact on all of us. And they say they are focusing on reducing the carbon footprint of football across England at all levels. The FA have joined the UN Sports for Climate Action framework and are currently developing a new 4-year sustainability strategy entitled Playing for the Future, with the aim of reducing negative impacts while establishing long-lasting initiatives both within and outside of football. The Premier League say they also recognise the need to take action and that they are committed to reducing their overall climate impact. In November 2021, they too signed up for the UN Sports for Climate Action framework with the aim of achieving net zero emissions by 2040. They also say that they are in the process of developing an environmental sustainability strategy, engaging with and alongside clubs and partners to find practical ways of reducing football's environmental impact. The effects of climate breakdown on football are clearly on the radars of the governing bodies, but clubs have taken things further by developing their own initiatives.
So the halo effect and Southampton have done a brilliant job in terms of the way they've taken this challenge and drawn it out.
So there's 4 main areas to it, all about responsibility, including the fans, social, corporate and environmental responsibility. Obviously with a club this size, it's a pretty big carbon footprint that they have, but that also is an opportunity to reduce it quite substantially. So lots of little initiatives from reducing single-use plastics on game days and in and around the club. I know that they've refurbished a lot of the furniture so that it can go to use instead of going to landfill. Old footballs, for example, giving them to schools instead of just throwing them away, and lots of little initiatives like that that just kind of bring that footprint down.
I made my debut against Shrewsbury in the FA Cup. Each player makes a debut as 250 trees planted in the local schools around Southampton to help the environment. So I think around 4 or 5 of us made their debuts at that game, so it was amazing what happened. 1,000 trees were planted. I mean, the club's helping the environment and promoting youth, so when we do well, it helps the environment, so everyone's really buzzing about it.
And in 2019, Sport Positive launched the Premier League Sustainability Table, the first time the clubs were ranked against each other on climate action.
So the Sport Positive Leagues essentially are a way for us to amplify and share the great stuff that football clubs are doing through our matrix of 11 categories. We give points across each category, such as renewable energy, energy efficiency, sustainable transport, vegan food options, etc. So Spurs and Liverpool are top of our current Premier League sustainability table. Spurs have been top for the past 3 years, and what they're doing really well across the board is at the stadium. Obviously, it's a new stadium, which gives them a good start, but it's an incredibly efficient stadium. It's powered by renewable energy. They've got a great waste efficiency effort. They've got good water efficiency efforts as well. Things like reusable plastic cups that we're seeing a lot more of at stadiums now, which is great. Availability of plant-based food. They're also doing a lot of great work at the training grounds as well. So things like green sedum roofs, etc., and ways that they're using water more effectively than they otherwise could be.
Spurs also helped make sporting history, hosting Chelsea in September 2021 in the first ever Game Zero, the world's first net zero carbon football match at elite level.
You know, the Game Zero was a great initiative because you always need to set an example and to show that things can be done.
I think Game Zero was brilliant because it drew a line in the sand. It's the first of its kind in terms of having a large-scale football match at that level with that many fans come to a stadium and end up with a zero carbon footprint at the end of it. Really, really beneficial in terms of that creation of that in the first instance, seen as a pilot, if you like, and asked a lot of questions of, like, can we do this again in the future? How far away are we from a season zero instead of a game zero? I've seen questions around, well, how far away is the Super Bowl from being this sort of Game Zero effect? If it's a one-off, can we do it as a one-off for really major championships, etc.? So I think it's provided a blueprint of what's possible, and then now we can build off that, and we're already starting to see other examples of that as well.
One of those examples took place in April this year, as Southampton hosted Arsenal in a fixture labelled The Greener Game as part of their Halo Effect sustainability ethos, with promotions on vegan food options, a free park and ride service, and activities for young fans outside the stadium. And it's not just Premier League clubs leading the way with their own initiatives, with more than 40 EFL teams signed up to the EFL Green Clubs scheme.
It's a pretty simple program. It's based on the work we've done here, focused on energy, transport and food. We've created something called Green Code, which takes people down the path to zero carbon.
The Green Code and what's happening there can be absolutely game-changing for EFL teams. Dale is sort of sharing, he's so generous with their effort, he doesn't see any of it as a secret. He wants everyone to do it. I know Forest Green invite clubs, leagues from all over the world to come and visit them and see what they're doing. So yeah, to share that and to collaborate with people is very important in this space.
So what exactly do Forest Green Rovers do so well as they lead the way in football's fight for the planet?
Animal agriculture is like one of the biggest drivers of the climate crisis globally. It's like second biggest in the world. That's why we have to avoid it, basically. You know, the raising of animals to feed ourselves is incredibly inefficient and releases massive amounts of greenhouse gas. What we really need is plants. Animals eat plants to give us protein. They get their protein from the plants. We can get it direct. So this is a little solar array. It's here for our fans to be able to see it because we've got a much bigger array on the roof of our south stand, which you can't see. And it makes 20% of all of the electricity we use here. The rest we make from a windmill up on top of the hill. We've got a fast charger in the middle and some slightly slower chargers on the outside. And we put this bay of chargers in 2010. There were hardly any electric cars on the road back then. And our fans definitely didn't have electric cars. But we figured, you know, if we don't put the pumps in, then nobody's going to come to a game in an electric car. And we wanted to enable that. And it was the same thinking that led us to build the electric highway, a national network of things like this so that people could charge their cars and drive the length and breadth of the country. It'll be the first stadium in the world to be made entirely of wood, and it'll have the lowest carbon footprint of any sports stadium in the world since the Romans invented concrete. And it's beautiful. Here we've got a couple of cutaways from the architect of what it would look like, the structure of it. You know, you get a sense of it, 3 stories, all made of wood, no concrete, and that's the really big deal in environment terms, no concrete. And this is the setting, this is the stadium in what we call Eco Park, which is a 50-hectare site, combination, 4,000 green job business park, bunch of football pitches for training complex, stadium, hotel. So making room for nature is really important to us. And one of the things we'll demonstrate here is sustainable development, how to do it properly, because often people say, oh, you shouldn't build on a green field and that kind of stuff. But we need somewhere to live, we need somewhere to work. We all need that. And what's really important is how we build, not if we build. So how we're building this with thousands of new trees, kilometres of new hedgerows, a wetland area, all that kind of stuff, will bring a 20% biodiversity increase over the farmland background, which is, I think, stunning, because there'll be 4,000 jobs created here, football stadium here, training complex here, and 20% more biodiversity.
It's not just in England where clubs are making efforts to reduce their carbon footprint. All across the UK, clubs are making changes to play their part in the fight for a more sustainable game.
So we earned the title of Greenest Club in Scotland back in 2019, and since then we've been working hard to make sure that we continue to earn that right. So we've been working on getting 100% renewable contracts for our energy in the stadium and at our training ground. So what we've done is we've got solar panel contracts coming on the roof, we've got vegan kiosks, we've got electric vehicles that are completely covering our fleet now, and we've put in charging points both at our training ground and at the stadium.
We made improvements to the stadium around about Euro 2020. We installed LED floodlights, which obviously reduce energy consumption. We are looking at other areas that we can implement round about the stadium in terms of bike sheds for active travel. We've got electronic charging points that have been installed, and that's part of the journey that we're on, to speak to relevant organisations and partners and understand exactly what that sustainability journey means.
And despite some financial limitations, there's also plenty of effort being put in at grassroots level.
Save Today, Play Tomorrow programme has really helped galvanise grassroots in this region. We looked, when we first started the programme, at what we actually own, so physically our own buildings, our own assets, what we can manage around staff and our stakeholders and our partners, and then what we can influence. There's a lot of advice, guidance and information that clubs can take. We've committed to being net zero by 2030, quite a commitment, but we're prepared to hang our hat on that commitment. The programme's been backed by our board, it's backed by Kevin, it's had investment of over £100,000, £25,000 of that was ring-fenced specifically for grassroots clubs and for them to make incremental changes. What was interesting is clubs really gave thought as to what they wanted to purchase. They didn't just go, oh, there's a grant there, we'll apply for it. They actually put some real thought into their applications. There is interest from grassroots clubs, and we're hoping that interest will escalate and we can start to form a swell of activity.
Governing bodies, leagues, clubs, fans, all playing their part. But isn't there a group we're forgetting? They are arguably football's most potent resource.
If you feel passionate enough, strong enough, the bigger goal is to share what you feel.
We actually want to collect old football clothes from clubs, give it a second life.
Nothing else can connect people in the way that sport and football does. So I think with that is a huge potential to make a massive change.
Federations, leagues and clubs are clearly taking action against climate change, but now more and more footballers and coaches themselves are fighting back in individual ways. The fashion industry has a very significant environmental impact. In fact, it's estimated that in the UK we buy more than 2 tons of clothing every minute, and in 1 month alone the carbon footprint of buying new clothing in the UK is worse than flying a plane around the world 900 times. So the sheer amount of kit in football is clearly a big issue.
The sport fashion industry is part of 5 to 10% of the global fashion industry, so it's huge. And the problem is huge because, we still haven't thought about the full circular economy around it. So now we're producing clothes without having any thought of how to use it when it's finished. What are teams doing when they throw away their clothes? And so we made a project which we call Green Bag, which is a project we're having partnered up with recycling companies, where we actually want to collect old football clothes from clubs, from players, and we want to recycle it, give it a second life.
Others whose playing careers have finished are also looking to help prolong the life of football kit. Ex-Chelsea goalkeeper Carlo Cudicini helped set up Footballers for Change, a charity that auctions off clothing worn by players around the world.
Everything started when my partner Rajuska didn't really know what to do with all the items that I accumulated along the season. We had this idea, and I started involving my teammates and players and ex-players, asking if they were happy to help, and the response was unbelievable.
You know, it's always good when you know how people work, when you know you can trust that the item ends up in the right place, the money is used in the right way, and obviously I've known Carlo for such a long time that obviously I knew how passionate he is about the project with his wife, and I decided to support because obviously we all play our part in the sustainability around our planet, and they do things well and they have a great cause, and obviously Footballers for Change is one thing which caught my attention, not only because of Carlo but the way they do it, and I was happy to support.
Football and fashion go hand in hand, and there are some memorable shirts from down the years. Well, sticking with those classics can be climate positive too.
I think that's where fashion can become so powerful. I think, with this retro idea, yes, it's the fashion statement, but it's also the sustainability that, there's two messages. You can wear something older and it be cool and it be sustainable at the same time. I think we all know the excitement of buying a new shirt when you're a kid and, becoming a fan of that one club when you're a kid. We've all done that. But the retro shirts coming back in, they're just amazing, and it's great to see so many people wearing them.
And there's more here too. Clothing is one thing. Football boots can be given a new lease of life as well.
So we're recycling boots that have been given to us by the academy and by the community. Young people doing that, and we're going to distribute those boots to people that be able to use them to participate and engage in sport and activity that wouldn't be able to do it otherwise.
It's a great initiative, old boots, recycling them and giving them to those people that maybe can't afford them. And yeah, it's a great cause because it's a gateway into football, if you like.
We've partnered with Football Rebooted. So we have just under 40 boot bins in and around the area that grassroots clubs have taken on, and they take the ownership of. So their players or local supporters will drop boots in, and they will be redistributed back into the local community to keep things in circulation for longer.
What about making today's kits more sustainable? Plenty of movement there already, with Forest Green again leading the way.
This year's innovation in the first team shirt is coffee grounds. It's made 50% coffee grounds, 50% plastic. Last year we did bamboo for the very first time, and next year we've got something special up the sleeve.
Sports brands have a huge responsibility. I think all clothing should be from recycled materials. I don't understand this new thing that we're all obsessed with. I think if there is a way to make things from recycled materials, then that's what we should be doing.
Recycled plastic is absolutely becoming the norm, and we've seen Liverpool, I think, trot out in a shirt with a design very much like that. We've seen Man United trot out in a design of a shirt very much like that. So it's not just materials, but actually design cues we're seeing travel to other places, which is cool.
So what's the most sustainable way to make a new shirt? How about not making it at all? Earlier this year, Brentford announced that they would be using the same shirt from last season again this year.
It's kind of become a little bit of a thing that every team has a new kit every year. Maybe that'll change at some point, but I think fans like to see a bit of continuity as well. I think it's quite nice to have the same kit and you can wear it again and again and not have to sort of feel like you're missing a trend, I guess, and think it puts a little bit of pressure on fans to go and get that new kit as well.
What we wear on the football pitch isn't the only area where football can fight back against climate change. It's also what we consume.
For me, the biggest change I think I ever made was going plant-based. I think when someone said you could change your carbon footprint by up to 70% purely on diet, that was, I'd made it for performance reasons, but then the environmental impact and change that I knew that would have, it was a no-brainer to stick to it, and that for me was such a positive impact that I knew I could make.
The thing that I guess triggered me in terms of maybe delving more into plant-based was my tendonitis on my knee. I'd had it for sort of 2-3 years ongoing, and anyone who's had it knows how annoying it can be. But just reducing the red meat alone massively reduced those symptoms. The benefits were sort of countless in terms of my recovery. We do different bloods for after games and after trainings. We could compare the results, my strength in the gym. It really was just everything in any aspects. It was massive improvements.
I think most athletes, most footballers are constantly looking for that 1% change or that 1% improvement that can make you feel better and play better. And I would honestly say I didn't do it overnight, but it took me maybe 2-3 months to be 100% plant-based. But I can honestly say that I felt the effects pretty quickly, and I felt better pretty quickly, and felt like I'd more energy. I felt like I was recovering quicker.
A couple of my friends started having a full-on plant-based diet. So I was wondering what it's about. Started watching documentaries, that are out on Netflix or whatever, and talking to those guys. And I've even tried it out fully plant-based, a diet for a couple of months, felt great. I can say that it does benefit a body in the way of well-being.
I would say the one thing, the biggest thing we can all do, the easiest thing and the thing with the biggest immediate impact, stop eating animals. And just do it once a week, once a day, it doesn't matter, just get started.
Players often have a huge platform to air their views on important topics like climate change, to get people talking around the world. And a few players have tried to spark that conversation with some unique individual ideas, from carbon neutral transfers to the specific number worn on the back of a shirt.
Now, normally number 2 is quite a right back number, the number nobody wants, and I thought that was the perfect number to choose. The symbolic value of the shirt is, of course, in terms of the Paris Agreement, the 2-degree goal, keeping global warming under 2 degrees. And I thought that would be a good symbol to showcase this. And I asked myself, what can I do as a football player? And I'm having this platform, people are listening to me. I'm so fortunate playing football, that people actually do listen to what I have to say. And I'm also seeing the huge influence all other football players have on their local communities. And some even global superstars have a global impact in terms of their influence.
I offset my carbon footprint, the transfer from Burnley to Brentford. I used it to donate to a charity. And they plant trees, they look after the climate, do work within the environment. And ideally it would have been a sort of completely carbon neutral transfer for us, get it all done that way. But logistics, transfers happening quickly, it's always difficult. For me, it's something I've been looking into over the past few years, trying to reduce my sort of carbon footprint and trying to become more aware about the environment and what impacts I can have, and as a sort of a person that does have a little bit of a profile, what can I use that for to help in any way possible?
Individual actions can make a small difference, but surely football's biggest impact is its reach and its ability to influence others, teammates, friends, fans, get them to change their mindsets and their behaviours in their daily lives.
It comes up so often now, it's hard to not see it in the news, it's hard not to talk about it in the changing room and things, and I would say predominantly it maybe is you bringing it up all the time, but I do think it's good. I think it's a discussion that needs to happen. And it probably doesn't happen as often as it should around changing rooms around the country, I think.
When we're upstairs having lunch and someone wants a coffee and they're using the paper cups and the plastic cups with the lids and you're there giving them the evils and making them feel guilty. But next time, like I've done it before and then you feel bad and then you ask questions and then the next time you don't do it. So little wins like that, I think, are the start of doing more yourself.
If one person can make a whole institution like Wycombe, for example, change in the better, I think maybe if we have a better education from the start, or even in the football world, if things have to be implemented, then all the football clubs can start changing.
It's people's habits, and it's continuously trying to make people have the conversation. Then we'll have a discussion more often about it, and it is just that gradual filtering throughout the changing room.
But then it's funny as well, because someone will come in and be like, have you watched this? When Seaspiracy was going around on Netflix and everyone's watching it, all of a sudden then people are thinking, I'm not going to
touch a fish ever again. But then it's like the habit that disappears, and then you go back to doing it. So it's keeping the conversation going, making sure that those topics are still talked about.
I know that we have, for example, in our dining room, a board where we have every day a question where they have to find the answers, and it comes from time to time that I try to give a little bit of a question where they have to think about the ecological part of our game or of our life. I do have an electric car. So the last question I had was how often does a wind wheel has to spin before I have charged my car? It was an interesting question. And yes, there were various answers from 10 times to 500,000 times. So they didn't really have a clue how much energy you need to charge my car. So and sometimes we try to sensibilize them for these questions, and this is funny. Yeah?
In terms of myself, of you know, doing everything I can, and that was the core question. I asked myself, what can I do as a football player? And I just thought, I was just imagining what could we do if we got together and spoke about this, spoke about how could we influence the global society in terms of increasing engagement and awareness about the climate and environmental crisis. We're trying to build a platform in the right way to get players engaged, because of course we know the problems of the players. They're very, you know, normally they're very sensitive about what they publish on social media, what kind of things they do. So we, you know, we're striving to become professional and something that they all can be a part of. So we don't have to be perfect. We just have to try to improve, try to be better every day, and then we'll eventually get there. Because it's not something you have to be perfect tomorrow, but you know, in 30 years, yes, then we have to be perfect. But we're still, you know, it's a process, and we're getting there.
Like racism, homophobia, and other huge challenges, this topic is coming up in dressing rooms up and down the country. So why aren't more from the football community speaking out about the subject?
There's a lot of barriers to people speaking out. I think there's also perhaps a lack of people thinking their voice matters in terms of this. I'm just one person, what difference can I make?
I think it's hard, maybe as a footballer, people just look at you as just a footballer. I think when you speak about other topics or other discussions, people are maybe quick to say that, you know, you're a footballer and kind of stick to that. Whereas actually when it's something as important as this, I think it's great when people are able to speak their minds and speak about things that they care about.
You know, I think it takes courage to stand up for a cause and something that you're passionate about. I think, you know, society, especially online, it can be quite divisive. It can be, you know, quite intense. People like to kind of have a dig at people that they don't necessarily completely agree with. So I think it is challenging at times to stand up and make a case for the thing you're passionate about.
It should be the best way to discuss it in a very respectful way, with more knowledge. And this is always the part, when you know more about it, and you think more about it, and then you can change it, and you have the feeling that you do something. And I think this is what is the best way to operate.
Whatever my voice, my opinion is, I'm not perfect, and I don't pretend to be perfect. I'm constantly evolving, and I want to get better and better. But you do have to be strong in terms of, if you do want to put something out there, there are going to be people who will either be against it or just even opposing fans and might not even care about the actual subject. But ultimately, if you feel passionate enough and strong enough, the bigger goal is to share what you feel.
One of the main barriers to speaking out on the subject is the accusation of hypocrisy. How can athletes and high-profile figures dare to give their opinion on climate change when their own carbon footprint is often higher due to a number of factors, but especially travel?
In your daily life, you have things that, probably could be done other ways. Let's say, for example, the flying, but I see it as my job. I was able to do so much through football. I don't know what other kind of transport we could get to different cities, playing the next day, coming back, playing 2 days after. So probably if there was a solution that would make everything easier for everyone and also would kind of take these things away, I think we'd all be open for it.
When you have 3 games a week and 2 times away, and you have to come back as quick as possible because you play Wednesday evening, you cannot go with the bus 6 hours, or nobody has enough place to lie down. Or you have to take some decisions where it's not really the neutral, carbon neutral decision. But when Greta Thunberg goes to the climate conference with a sailing boat all over the Atlantic Ocean, and she takes 2 weeks, I think, to come there, or 3 weeks, yeah, and yeah. This is the problem. You cannot travel like this. In reality, it's not possible. Eh?
I try always to be honest, to tell that yes, I'm flying a lot and it's not good. It would be better if I didn't fly. Then I tell people what I do to compensate a bit. I calculate the amount of CO2 that I have put into the air by flying, and then I pay for green projects in other countries to compensate for that.
So often when people are considering taking a stand, speaking out on green issues, let's say, for example, not just green issues, but let's take that one, they will be afraid that they'll be attacked. Somebody will say, yes, but you're wearing leather shoes if you're a vegetarian, for example. That's an old one, but it's still out there. And I say to people, look, don't worry about that, actually. It's much better to do something. Don't worry that you can't do everything overnight. And if somebody finds a flaw in what you're doing, just pick it up and say, okay, I acknowledge that. I'll deal with it now if I can. I'll deal with it later if I can't. But it's not going to stop me doing the things that I can do.
Put climate change to one side. Everyone's a hypocrite in some way, I think. Like, for example, if I, went hours without having a drink of water, I'm not going to be like, no, I can't buy plastic, because that's against my principle. I need it because I'm thirsty, I'm dehydrated, because there's always things that you have to compromise sometimes. It's trying to break down those barriers for people and say it's okay, you don't have to be pure. They sort of say you don't need 100 perfect people, you need a million imperfect people, but just trying to do the right thing.
It's about improving. It's about wanting to become something in the future, and it's the mindset, and I think that's what I'm trying to spread in a positive way.
I heard the quote, you're either a hypocrite or a cynic. And so it's like there's no such thing as a perfect environmentalist. We all live in a society where we have an impact on the world, but it's just putting your hands up saying, hey, I'm not perfect, but I'm doing the best I can, and I'm making steps towards a better world. When I think about football, I think about how it brings so many people together all across the world. Nothing else can connect people in the way that sport and football does. So I think with that is a huge potential and possibility to kind of bring everyone together and make a massive change.
Anything that we as players or football clubs can do to even make a small change, I think is huge.
I think players are role models, we always hear that. And when you look around, big game, millions of kids are watching, the player makes some celebration, now half of the world is doing the same celebration. And this is what the power, where the power is. And this is why, football can be the moving force.
With that power we have in the football world, we also have the responsibility to make changes in the world.
I'm often asked, about the responsibility of football for the environment. And I don't think it's any bigger or smaller than the responsibility any of us has. But what football has is a platform to reach people, and players have a platform as well, a really big platform. Fans look up to players as much as they look up to clubs, and they take a steer from them in terms of how they live their lives. So players have absolutely got the right platform to help push the crowd along.
The fans are the lifeblood of football, and if fans speak out and say, we really care about this and we want you to do more, or we're worried about this, etc., clubs will move.
I think it should be the most powerful vehicle we have and the most powerful tool we have as a global society. It is the biggest social phenomenon in the world. It is by far the biggest sport. It's bigger than any other religion, any other culture. It's so huge, I think really football could save the world.
Football is starting to come together to really highlight just how critical things are. And there's no doubt about the urgency of the situation. Winning a title is hard enough. Successfully defending it, even harder. Triumphing every season, it's unsustainable. But football as a sport becoming sustainable, that would surely be a huge victory. One or two star players won't help save your favourite club or our beautiful game only a true team effort will be enough to beat football's toughest opponent.